Hello. I know I give you zero warning and I just show up, but that's okay. I was just on a call with, what was I doing? I was on a call. I was on an interview. I was on an interview for a series with a woman, for moms. And it was so fascinating. We were talking about practices that we can do in, less than 10 minutes a day to stay connected to ourselves, to keep building towards what we want, to feel good, basically, to stay on the path of what we want in life, but recognize that life is busy. And what came up for me was that there's actually a practice that I've done for years, and I've recommended to a few clients over the years. But I want to share it because it's about connecting to your intuition, connecting to your inner self, building that trust muscle with your inner self. I love that Lisa Nichols talks about things in form of muscles, like determination muscle and trust muscle. So I'm borrowing that from her. So we have this ability to tap into our own intuition, our ability to tap into our own inner guidance, to stop being a people pleaser and actually have an opinion. Is it possible? Could I have an opinion? Stuff coming out of the corner. Yes, we have opinions. We have opinions. We have desires. We have hopes. We have perspective. We have preferences. So if you're a people pleaser, this is big. People pleaser, right? People pleaser, people blah, 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 blah. I was a people pleaser to the extreme. So I know that sounds silly because you're like, yeah, but Alexis, you quit your job, you sold your house. Clearly you weren't pleasing people. Fair enough. The big things weren't that hard, but there's subtle ways, right? Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. What do you want? What do you want to do this weekend? I'm not sure. What would you like? Or, which is the obvious ones, the less obvious ones is when you change and morph your life because you think somebody's going to be mad at you. This is like my forte. I do things just out of anticipation that somebody's going to be mad at me. And I've had this for decades and decades and decades. But a couple of years ago, I was like, this is ruining my life. It's ruining my relationships. It's ruining my life. So there's a couple things that need to happen. I need to come back to myself. I need to build up the inner self. I need to get rid of whatever this is stemming from, all sorts of stuff. And this is one of the most powerful practices I did for building up my inner connection. So it's really simple and you can adapt it. So I'm going to give you the hint of it and then show you how to adapt it. So here's what I did. In the moment, I would say, what would be the most loving choice? You can insert joyful choice. What would be the loving choice? What would be the most joyful choice? What would be the feel-good choice? What would just feel good right now? And I would ask that question. And for a long, long time, I got nothing. Radio silence from my inner self. What you call whatever you want, your inner child, my inner self. Because I was just laughing on this call with a woman because she says, just like a child, right? The child's in the corner being like, you want to talk to me? Because I've been over here for a long time and you haven't wanted to talk to me. Now you want to talk to me? And they don't say anything, right? Because there's no trust there. There's no trust there. But we know what happens with children who feel safe. 10 seconds later, they're throwing a party and I'm in charge here, right? And so that's what we're going for. How can we get from that space where your inner child is I'm not speaking to you, to I feel so safe that I now express myself all the time and I don't even hesitate, to the point that sometimes you're like, hey, now hold it back, right? So here's the process. Ask the question. Ask the question, what would feel best right now? What would feel loving right now? What would feel joyful right now? And we just wait. The point is to ask the question, not to do what you hear. So what happened is there were these steps. First, there was silence. For a long time, silence. Maybe months, maybe years, there was silence. But I kept asking the question. And then I'd get these flashes, these little insights, but I couldn't understand them. I couldn't interpret them. I just, as soon as it was there, it was gone. It was this little flash. And I thought, okay, something's starting. I just can't understand it. It's too fast. I can't interpret what it is. It would come as a vision or a feeling, but I couldn't really hold on to it. But I kept asking the question, what would feel good right now? What would feel loving right now? What would feel joyful right now? Not all three of those, just choose one. And then I would actually get a response. Okay, I can hear you. I can hear you. You're talking to me. And then next stage, I start listening. Because hearing and listening are not the same thing. Right? So I'm oh my gosh, something's talking. Ah! And then there's the listening of okay, what's the wisdom in that? And then maybe then we start to act on it. Right? So there's actually a lot of steps here. So we'd start with, let me ask the question, even if you're not answering. So let me create a safe space for you, you inner child, for you, you intuition, to come out of hiding where you've been locked down. Come out of hiding. And then as they come out of hiding, like, okay, I can see that you're trying to tell me something, but I can't understand it. And then you start to speak the same language because you've put so much effort into holding this space for them. You start to speak the same language and you can hear them. And then you can start to listen and really get what they're saying. So beyond just the words, you're like, oh, you're talking now, I understand. And then and only then can we decide if we let it out, right? So here's how to use it. And this is the example I gave in the interview today because it's a really clear example in my life. You know those days when you're sitting around and you're bored and you're like upset, not upset, but just sort of like, and you're looking around the house and like everywhere you look is a project and you're like, oh, I don't want to do my work and I don't want to have to clean that up and I don't want to have to do that. And so you just feel like everything asks work of you. And so you're like, I know, instead I'm going to stand in front of the refrigerator and look for something to eat. And so you look at it and you're like, nothing sounds good. Open all the cupboards. Nothing sounds good. And so you're just in this sort of space of like, I want something to make this better. That's a moment. What would feel good? What would really feel good? What would feel loving? What would feel joyful? And in those moments, that's when you ask, right? That's when you ask the question. And sometimes you're going to get an answer. So this happened to me today. I'm driving home from picking up my car at the mechanics and I stopped at the gas station because I needed fuel. And I went and got a coffee at the gas station. Don't judge me. And of course, the gas station has a sale on my favorite candy. So I was like, okay, I'll get a bag of that. I don't need sugar, but no way. I am right now. Okay. So then I have the bag of sugar and my inner self, because I've now worked on this for years, is screaming at me, not in a negative way, but just really loudly expressing itself. Like, we want healthy food. First thing in the morning, it would be so lovely if you gave us something nourishing to hold on to because we really want that first bite of something to just be really, really nourishing so we can absorb all the minerals from it. And I could hear this. I could hear this really loud inner voice coming out. Again, not in a negative way, just really like telling me what it really wants. And I was like, I hear you. I hear you. I think you're right. I think that'd be great. But look at this bag of candy. We should open it and smell it. Because that's not eating it. That's just smelling it. And my inner voice was like, we get that you're going down that track, but can't you just something so nourishing would be lovely, like a banana or oatmeal or something really yummy. And then my mind was like, but now that we've smelled it, why don't we just try a candy, right? So it doesn't matter. The whole point of that story is I did eat 2 pieces of candy and then decided that my inner voice was right. But the point of that story was that I had this now really, really loud conversation with my inner self. I know what my choice is. I know what the best thing for me is. I know what my personal preference is. But that took years of getting there. And it took years of asking this question. What would be the loving choice? Or what would be the joyful choice? Or what would feel good right now? And we just ask the question. We're just holding the space for that inner part of you, that inner part that has been so tamped down over years and years and years of people telling you that your opinion didn't matter, or not right now, or stop talking, or maybe later, or save that for your home life, years of keeping quiet. We're training ourselves to come out of the shadows, and that takes time. So we have to give it the patience that it deserves, and we have to give it the attention that it deserves. And eventually we'll get to a place where, like now, I'm so excited and proud because my inner voice is like, honey, I'm trying to tell you what I want. I know you can hear me. And it's really loud and clear. And I understand what it's saying. I can interpret it exactly. I totally, totally get it. Brilliant. Again, you don't have to follow it. Or like me, you can follow it kind of and then be like, oh, you were right. Okay, fine. I'm not beating myself up for the choice my mind made, but I can see that my inner wisdom was right. So this is a process. Ask these questions. What would feel good? What would feel best? What would feel good right now? What would be the loving choice? What would feel loving right now? What would feel joyful right now? Those kinds of questions, just keep asking them. Keep asking them. And you're going to get there. Just like in yoga, my teacher told me you get an inch of flexibility in your hips a year. It's going to take a long time, but that doesn't mean we stop trying, right? It's going to take a while, but keep asking the question because the benefits are so bountiful. They're so massive. They're so massive because to get to a space where somebody asks you a question and you have inner guidance that very clearly communicates and you trust that, and you can bring the power of your mind in, and you can bring the power of your network, of your skills, of your history, bring all of that together and speak with inner wisdom, you're unstoppable. That's you. That's the process of becoming you, right? So one of the pieces of that process is to build this self-trust, is to build this inner voice and the relationship that you have with the inner voice. Because it's just one of the voices, right? You still have your mind. You still have social pressure. You still have other things, other voices, what you should do, like history, your story is talking to you as well. It's just one of the voices, but this is a voice that most of us want to build because it's lacking. And when we have a strong inner voice, when we have a strong relationship with our own self, our own sense of preference, our own sense of desire, our own sense of what would be best, then we can make decisions that are much more rooted and grounded. So I hope this is really helpful. I'd love to hear if you have a similar process and practice that you just haven't named in this way, or if there's a piece of this that you have a question about, or if there's a piece that really resonates for you. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. My suggestion, if you want to try this practice, is just to do it. And what can happen is so many of us are flooded with options, right? We have tons and tons of practices that we could do all the time. This is one of those practices that just continually runs in the background, kind of like your computer server. It's like just running back here all the time because this one takes time. I mean, they all take time, right? All take time. We can have these moments of flash of like, oh my God, life could be like this. But then we come back and we have to get there. So this is one of those practices that helps us build over time that inner relationship, that inner voice, that inner trust, so that we can stop people pleasing, so that we can have opinions, we can actually like move forward with our own guidance, all of that amazing stuff that we want. We can become you, become you, become you, become you. So we do this one over time. The times I've used it, something just beeped at me. What do you want? What do you want? Oh, it's a message. So the times I use this, like I said, are the times when I'm like, wow, I'm unhappy with everything. I don't want to deal with anything. I'm standing at the fridge being like, nah, nothing looks good. That kind of stuff. Other times I've used it would be, when you're really like sad or frustrated. Those are really good times when you're really beating up on yourself, particularly if that's a habit for you to beat up on yourself. Like, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to make it. I'm so far behind, blah, blah, blah. In those moments, what would be the loving choice? What would feel loving right now? What would feel good right now? Of course, there's a part of you that's like, yeah, but you don't deserve it. Even if you heard something, you might argue with it. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of the practice. The point of the practice is to ask the question so you can create the space to hear the internal answer. That's the point. So even if you get an answer, like maybe you're beating yourself up and you're like, I'm so far behind, I have so much work to do. And you say, well, what would feel loving right now? And inside you hear a loud answer, right? You hear a loud answer. So you're on stage 3. And then your mind is like, you don't deserve to go for a walk. Who said you could go for a walk? You can't go for a walk until you finish this. Since when do you think this is easy? Is this just playtime for you? You don't get to go for a walk, blah, blah, blah. You have to finish this, right? That's okay. That's another process that we're dealing with in another practice. But this practice, ask the question, listen for the answer. Ask the question, listen for the answer. And it goes, at least for me, what I noticed is there was silence. Whoops, over here. Silence. And then there was a flash that I couldn't interpret. And that moved into a noise that I could hear. And then it moved into, oh, I get what you mean. Listening, understanding. And then I would be able to integrate it and bring it into my life. So those are the stages that I went through with this practice. But take the time. Hold the space. Ask the question. It doesn't matter which question it is because it's all asking the same thing, right? What do you want? That question to me is a bit too aggressive, and it put me in this corner of like, I don't know what I want. I never know what I want. If only I knew what I want, this would be easy. So that question was too much for me. So it was much more gentle for me to approach it in this moment, what would feel loving? In this moment, what would feel joyful? Because there are much more limited questions, and they're not triggering your brain. They're asking your body directly, because they're asking about the feeling of loving, the feeling of joy, the feeling of being better, more comfortable, more content, more soft, whatever. So ask that way instead. It doesn't matter exactly which emotion you're asking about, but keep it in that feeling-based space of the body instead of being like, well, what do you want? Because that triggers the mind and it triggers our fears, and it actually triggers, what it does is it highlights the fact that we don't have this relationship. So we go into defensiveness of like, well, if I knew what I want, then this would be blah, 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 right? So that's what we're trying to heal, is that, how do I know what I want? So we ask a different question. What would feel like the most loving choice? What would feel joyful? What would feel loving? What would feel peaceful? That's the question you ask. Hopefully that is helpful. I would love to hear your insight into this. If you've done a similar practice, if you're going to try this, please let me know, and then we can check in with you. If you have something like this that has worked for you or hasn't worked for you, share that as well. And I will see you online. Mwah! Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry.